Do you believe in love that defies everything? In decisions that may seem reckless, but deep down hide the purest kind of courage? Then get ready, because the story you're about to hear will stir something in your heart. But before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and comment below. What kind of story do you love most? The ones about overcoming hardship, impossible love, or those plot twists that flip everything upside down? Because today, you'll meet Helena, an 18-year-old girl, pure, dreamy, and judged for following her heart, until the truth turned everything on its head. Helena was known for her serene beauty and gentle nature, as if she had stepped out of an old folk tale. She lived with her parents in a secluded village nestled in the mountains of Santa Leopoldina, a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. The only daughter of a fabric merchant and a quiet housewife, Helena was seen as the jewel of the village, always wrapped in care, rules, and high expectations. Her parents dreamed of a grand wedding, maybe with the mayor's son or a wealthy landowner's heir. But Helena had other dreams, and none of them involved status or riches. At the town street market, surrounded by fruit stalls and the scent of fresh bread, she met Tiago. He sold firewood chopped by his own hands, riding a thin, tired-looking mare. His beard was unshaven, his old hat shadowed his eyes, and his silence said more than 1,000 words. The first time Helena saw him, her heart skipped a beat. He didn't try to impress her. No charming lines, no flirty glances. He simply held out a small piece of hand-carved wood, a tiny flower, and smiled like someone offering a secret. The village didn't take long to react. "Did you see who Norberto's daughter has been talking to?" whispered the neighbors at their windows. "A man with no name, no future. She must be under a spell." Helena knew the community's eyes were heavy on her, like stones. But there was something in Tiago no one else could see. A quiet care, a rare kindness, a strength that didn't need shouting to be felt. Still, the pressure grew with every meeting, and her parents began to suspect. "You're too young, too. Make that kind of mistake," her mother warned, noticing the distant look in Helena's eyes. Deep down, Helena felt fear too. Fear of being wrong. Fear of disappointing everyone. But more than anything, she feared ignoring the feeling growing inside her chest like roots in the ground. When Tiago started showing up at dusk, helping with the water buckets or leaving wildflowers at her gate, Helena realized she could no longer pretend. And on a rainy night, while the house slept, she slipped out, heart pounding, to meet him by the river. Beneath an ancient fig tree, he held her hands and whispered, "I have nothing to offer you, except the truth. But if you'll have it, that's how I'll love you." That moment, wrapped in the fog of dawn, was when Helena made her choice. She didn't want gold rings or crowded celebrations. She wanted someone who would hold her hand, even without knowing what came next. And even though the world wouldn't understand, she looked into Tiago's eyes and said, "Then love me with the truth, because it's all I have to give you too." They sealed their promise with a shy kiss, full of fear and hope. What they didn't know was that nothing would ever be the same again, and it was on that very night that the first step toward scandal was taken. By the next morning, the gossip had already spread through the village like wildfire on dry grass. Donna Estelita, the nosiest neighbor on the street, swore up and down she saw Helena returning home with soaked clothes and rain-matted hair. Within hours, every glance Helena received was heavy with judgment. Her mother noticed the strange silence over breakfast and grew suspicious, but it was her father who confronted the truth first. "Did you go out last night?" he asked, voice low and firm. Helena hesitated. "I went to meet Tiago. He respects me, and I care about him." The words hit like thunder. Her father's eyes hardened, and her mother dropped her cutlery with a sharp metallic clink. Helena was forbidden from leaving the house. Locked in like a criminal, she spent her days under watch, while rumors spread with more poison than truth. They say he's got a dark past, that he fled from another town, people whispered. Some claimed Tiago had been in prison, or worse, involved in dangerous things. The villagers, always quick to judge and slow to ask, didn't need proof, just a juicy story. And Tiago, with his quiet ways, made the perfect villain. But Helena didn't give in. On hidden nights, she would leave letters wrapped in cloth near the chicken coop, where Tiago would find them. He'd answer with dried flowers, short notes, and small wooden carvings. It was a secret love, but truer than most public vows. And through this quiet routine, Helena made her decision. Tired of being treated like a child, she chose to face her parents. She sat at the table and with a trembling voice declared, "I'm going to marry Tiago." The reaction was explosive. Her father, Su Norberto, rose from his chair like he'd been slapped. "Marry? A woodcutter with nothing to his name? You're throwing your life away, Helena." Donna Marlin began to cry, as if her daughter had just announced a terminal illness. "You're still a virgin, my child, only 18. You'd give yourself to a man like that, poor, unknown?" Helena, eyes brimming, replied with quiet strength, "I'd rather have a poor love than a rich lie." It was the first time her parents saw her as a woman, and they didn't know how to handle it. The news spread quickly. "Helena's marrying that poor man from the woods." Some laughed. Others were scandalized. Some even claimed she had been bewitched. Tiago, on the other hand, showed up at Helena's doorstep days later, hat in hand, head held high. "I've come to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage," he told her father, who barely hid his disdain. "You don't even have a penny to your name, boy," he snapped. But Tiago, calm and composed, replied, "I have enough to care for her with respect." And that's more than many so-called men can say. The wedding was arranged in a rush, to her family's dismay. No party, no rented dress, just a simple ceremony in the little stone chapel. Few guests, many onlookers. And it was the night before the wedding, while Helena packed her few belongings into a worn suitcase, that Donna Marlin, through tears and bitterness, made one final attempt to stop the union. "You'll regret this. That man is hiding something. And when you find out, it might be too late." Those words echoed in Helena's mind all night long. But what she didn't know was that her mother was more right than she could ever imagine. The morning of the wedding dawned beneath a heavy fog, as if the sky itself had chosen to look away from what many called a public disgrace. Helena wore a simple dress, sewn by her own mother through tears and silent protests. The fabric was modest, but on her it looked like it was made of clouds and hope. As she gazed at her reflection in the cracked mirror, she felt a mixture of fear and courage, the same blend she had felt the night she first danced with Tiago under the fig tree. Inside the church, the pews were filled with half-covered faces, fake smiles, and poisonous whispers. Some had come just to witness the scandal, others out of pure curiosity. Tiago arrived on his tired-looking mare, drawing looks of disdain from the guests. But there was something in his posture, firm, calm, and dignified, that disturbed people more than any sign of poverty ever could. He stopped in front of the church, dismounted with quiet restraint, and walked slowly toward the altar, where Helena waited with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. During the ceremony, the priest's words were barely audible over the constant murmurs. But when Helena looked into Tiago's eyes and said, "I do," it was as if the outside world had gone silent. In that moment, she saw no poverty, no shame, no humiliation, only the one certainty she still had. She loved him. Tiago spoke, his vows with a choked voice. I promise to care for you with the hands life has hardened, with the soul you awakened in me, and with a love no money could ever buy. But the whispers didn't stop, not even with the final kiss. As they exited the church, a light rain began to fall, and the guests, huddled beneath umbrellas, still cast sharp, disapproving glances. A woman in the front row muttered loudly, "Marrying that man is the same as signing your own downfall." Helena heard it, but didn't flinch. With Tiago by her side, she walked down the village's main road with her head held high. Each step was a defiance to those who expected her to fail before the first night even began. The house where they would now live stood isolated, atop a hill surrounded by wild grass and silence. No electricity, no running water. The floor was packed dirt, and the windows creaked at the slightest wind. But there, among birdsong and the sound of an axe splitting wood, Helene found something she had never known before. Peace. The routine was harsh. They rose before sunrise, cared for the animals, planted what they ate, and shared chores like battle-worn companions. And even when the fatigue ate deep in their bones, she felt grateful in small gestures. Tiago revealed himself. He made necklaces from seeds, hid handwritten notes inside her clothes, hung hammocks in trees so she could rest after work. He never raised his voice, never let her carry anything too heavy alone. A love like that didn't need luxury. It just needed to exist. But even there, far from the village, the echo of prejudice still reached them. Refused visits, letters left unanswered, invitations ignored. Society had turned its back. And no matter how strong Helena tried to be, it was beginning to hurt. Until one hot afternoon, while sweeping the dusty old shed beside the house, Helena stumbled over a loose floorboard. The wood gave way, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. The floor. Her heart began to race. She lifted the lid and found an old, dust-covered trunk secured with a rusted chain. The key was nailed discreetly behind a beam. With trembling fingers, she opened the trunk. And what she found inside would shake any love to its core. And it was in that instant that she knew Tiago was hiding something. Something big. Something that could change everything. Inside the trunk, carefully arranged under a thick cloth, were dozens of documents, old letters, and money. A lot of money. Bundles of well-preserved bills, tied with ribbons and marked with dates from years past. Helena's eyes widened, struggling to understand, who was this man she had married? Why would a poor woodcutter who sold firewood at markets be hiding a small fortune beneath the floor? There were also papers bearing names she had never heard before. Records of properties in other towns, maps with marked locations, and among it all, a letter written in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting. She read it, heart in her throat. The letter was addressed to Tiago de Albuquerque Costa, a name he had never mentioned. In it, a lawyer confirmed the transfer of assets following the death of a woman named Lavra, apparently Tiago's mother. It was all there. He was the heir to one of the largest estates in the northern region of the state. But what struck Helena most was the final line of the document. I understand your decision to live far from it all, but remember, you cannot hide the truth forever. Helena felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Everything she thought she knew about Tiago had been a facade. When he arrived home at dusk, he found Helena sitting quietly by the shed. She didn't accuse him. She simply held out the letter, eyes filled with tears. Tiago, upon seeing the contents, closed his eyes slowly, like someone who had been expecting this moment. He sat beside her, removed his hat, and for the first time spoke of his past. Yes, Helena, I am the man in that letter, and everything you found is true. But I'm no longer that heir. I chose to disappear after what happened to my mother. The greed in my family, the fights, the betrayals, it all made me want to run from everything. Helena listened in silence, heart tight in her chest, eyes locked on him. You should have told me, she whispered. Tiago took a deep breath. I didn't want you to love me for what I had. I wanted to know if someone could love me for who I am now. Just me, nothing more. And you did. You were the only one. His words struck deep, but they didn't erase the feeling that something vital had been hidden. And now? She asked, voice trembling. Are you going back to that life you left behind? Will you leave me too? Tiago held her hand firmly. I don't want any of that, Helena. Not the land, not the wealth, not the fancy name. I just want you, but I'll understand. If you can't stay. His words hung in the air like a weight too heavy to hold. Helena stood, walked to the door, paused, and looked back at him one last time before entering. You didn't lie with your words, Tiago, but you did lie with your silence. And now I need time to figure out if I can forgive that. That night was the first they ever spent in separate rooms in the village. No one knew what had happened. But Helena's behavior changed. She no longer smiled as she used to, no longer walked with the same lightness. Doubt gnawed at her. Was the love she felt strong enough to survive such a secret? Or was it all just a beautiful story built on a well-crafted lie? Tiago, meanwhile, withdrew. He worked harder, spoke less, and every quiet gesture became a silent attempt to regain her trust. But what he didn't know was that something even more serious was about to happen, because someone else also knew about the trunk. It was on a stifling and silent afternoon that everything changed. Helena had gone into the village to buy salt and cornmeal when she noticed two unfamiliar men speaking with Mr. Dario, the old shopkeeper. They were far too well dressed for the region and had the look of men who observe more than they see. One of them, wearing a wrinkled suit and a piercing gaze, whispered something to the other as soon as Helena walked in. She pretended not to notice, but her stomach twisted. As she walked out, she overheard one of them say, "That's her." The spitting image of his mother. The words froze her in place. How did they know? In the following days, the two men began lurking around the village. They asked questions about Tiago, spoke to neighbors, offered money for information. As always, Donna Estelita was the first to open her mouth. She said he was strange, that no one knew where he'd come from, and that he only married a pure young woman to climb the social ladder. The rumors returned with force. Now, in addition to being poor, Tiago was accused of being a con man. Helena listened in silence, but deep down, she sensed something serious was coming. Tiago, meanwhile, noticed the shift in the air, and deep inside, he already knew what was coming. One evening, one of the men appeared on their property. He knocked on the door without ceremony, holding a leather briefcase and wearing a smug expression. He introduced himself as Silvera, a lawyer for the Albuquerque Costa family, and said he'd come to reclaim what rightfully belonged to the family. You can play poor all you want, Tiago, but you still carry the name of a millionaire bloodline. And that comes with a price. Helena listened from behind the cracked door, her heart racing. Tiago replied calmly, "I want nothing from that life." But Silvera gave a twisted smile. "Then I hope you're ready to give up peace, because it just ended." By the next morning, the entire village was talking. Tiago has a hidden fortune. Helena married him for the money. They're leaving and abandoning everything. Helena could barely step outside without hearing spiteful remarks. The judgmental glances returned, but now they carried a new tone, envy. The girl once humiliated for marrying a poor man was now seen as the accomplice of a disguised heir. And amid all this chaos, her father, Mr. Norberto, finally crossed. Their gate. After months without seeing his daughter, he arrived with his head down, eyes filled with shame, not for what she had done, but for what he had failed to see. "You were always right, my daughter," he said, voice choked. "It's not what a man owns, it's who he is. And Tiago, he's better than all those fancy doctors in suits." Helena cried, not because of the words, but because of the courage it took for her father to say them. In that moment, she decided she wouldn't let anyone define the story they were building. If they try to take what we have, they'll need more than papers and threats. Because this, Dad, this is love, and no one's taking it. But while she spoke, Tiago was already preparing in silence to make a decision that would change everything. That very night, he got out of bed quietly, wrote a short note, left it on the kitchen table, and left before sunrise. The note simply read, "I'm going to finish what I started. You deserve to live without fear. And I need to face my past. For us." When Helena woke up and found the letter, her heart skipped a beat. The bed was cold. The house was silent. And the emptiness heavier than ever. Tiago was gone. Alone. Without saying where. But she knew something big was about to be revealed. And this time, it wasn't a secret. It was a truth. One that could change everything. Tiago rode for hours, crossing forgotten trails and rotting wooden bridges, until he reached what remained of the old Albuquerque Costa estate, a decaying mansion surrounded by twisted trees and a heavy silence. The place had been abandoned. For years, yet it still held the ghosts of the past. He dismounted from his mare and stepped inside. The air smelled of dust, old paper, and unspoken sorrow. Each step he took down the hallways felt like walking over memories that had never been buried. He knew what he needed to do. And he also knew who was waiting for him on the other side of that house dot in the old office that once belonged to his late grandfather. Silvero was waiting, now accompanied by an older man in a crisp suit with a frozen stare. Tiago's uncle, Alberto, the last surviving heir of the family and the one most interested in reclaiming what Tiago had once abandoned. "You made your choice, boy. You ran off, turned yourself into some backwoods peasant, and now you show up playing the martyr?" Alberto mocked without rising from his chair. Tiago took a deep breath. "I didn't come back to reclaim anything. I came to officially declare that none of this belongs to me, and it never will again." Silvera shot a quick glance at the uncle, clearly caught off guard. "You really want to give it all up? Even knowing that, legally, this still belongs to you?" Tiago nodded. "I want the land sold. I want the money donated to institutions that help young people like I once was, lost, aimless, crushed, by families drunk on power." The room fell silent. The uncle let out a bitter laugh, the kind of laugh that comes from losing a battle you never expected to fight. "You're a fool. You'll die poor with a woman who saw you as a beggar." Tiago met his gaze. "She saw me as a man, and that's worth more than any will." Meanwhile, back home, Helena paced in circles, anxiety throbbing at her temples. She wanted to run after him, but didn't know where. She wanted to believe everything would be okay, but the fear of being left alone for the second time in her. Life loomed larger than hope. When night fell, and the gate still hadn't opened, she sat on the porch floor, hugging her knees, letting the cold wind sting her face. "Come back to me, Tiago," she whispered into the dark. "I chose you before I knew who you were, and I'd still choose you, even knowing it all now." In the dead of night, the sound of hooves approaching warmed her chest. Helena ran. To the gate, eyes misty, heart pounding. Tiago dismounted with a quiet smile, his face tired, but his eyes holding something she had never seen before, liberation. "It's done," he said simply. She rushed into his arms and held him like She'd never let go again. You came back. He held her close. I never really left. But before the relief could fully settle, Tiago looked at her with a serious expression. There's one last thing, one last truth. You still need to know. Helena felt her body go cold. There was no room left for secrets, she thought. But Tiago pulled a folded envelope from his saddlebag, yellowed with time. He handed it to her with trembling hands. This letter is from my mother, and inside is a name that will change everything you think you know about how we were brought together. Helena took the envelope slowly, as if it were made of dynamite. She opened it, read it, and when she finished, the only words she could say were, "This can't be true." The world spun, the lines on the paper blurred, and suddenly, nothing made sense anymore. Because in that letter, there was something that had connected Helena and Tiago long before they ever met. Helena read the letter again with trembling hands, as if searching for an error, a flaw, a single misplaced comma that could undo everything she had just discovered. But there was no mistake. The firm and delicate handwriting of Lavra, Tiago's mother, was clear. She and Donna Marlene, Helena's mother, had once been inseparable friends in their youth. But the most shocking revelation came in the final lines. Marlene's only daughter was born of the same blood as Tiago. Blood she understand one day. Because before I was her friend, I was her rival. Helena felt a knot twist in her chest. Rival, Tiago, his face heavy with sorrow, watched her in silence. My mother and yours. They had a past. They loved the same man. According to this letter, my father could have been yours, and almost was. The information cut like a knife, turned slowly inside her. Helena tried to organize her thoughts. Are you saying we might be siblings? Tiago lowered his head. The letter doesn't say it outright, but it hints. And even if we're not bound by blood, our families are tied together by wounds that never healed. Helena staggered. A step back, the ground beneath her suddenly unsteady. The weight of doubt was worse than any absolute truth. Because now, the love she had fought so hard to protect was surrounded by a decaying past, thick with omissions and old scars. Tiago gently held her by the shoulders. I know what this looks like, Helena. I'm trying to make sense of it too. But I swear on everything we've shared, if I had known this before, I would have told you. I didn't hide from you. I hid from what I was raised to be. His eyes were red but steady. It was an unspoken ply for forgiveness, a desperate attempt not to lose her now. The next morning, Helena set out to find the one person who could bring clarity, her mother. She returned to her parents' home with firm steps, the envelope in her hand and her heart pounding. When Donna Marlene saw her, she turned pale. She knew. She had always known. They sat face to face on the porch, where so many silences had piled up over the years. Helena showed her the letter. Why didn't you ever tell me? Her mother sighed, defeated. Because the past hurts, my daughter. Because sometimes the truth destroys more than silence. But it was too late. The silence had already caused enough damage. Donna Marlene confirmed everything. Yes, she and Lavra had both been involved with the same man, a traveling soldier who had promised them the world and then vanished. Yes, each woman had a child. And yes, there was a real chance. Helena and Tiago shared the same father. I was never sure, Helena. And by the time I found out who he really was, it was already too late. All I had left was fear. Fear that one day you'd meet him. Helena wept in silence. Her whole life, all the judgment she had faced for loving Tiago, now were a deeper pain. It wasn't just the village judging her. It was fate. It was blood. It was the past now threatening their future. When she returned home, Tiago was waiting on the porch, his face weary, his heart in his eyes. "And now?" he asked, voice breaking. Helena didn't answer right away. She sat beside him and held his hand. "Now, we go all the way. We find the whole truth. If we're siblings, we'll live with it. But if we're not, no one's going to tear us apart again." And there, beneath a gray sky and the weight of everything they had yet to uncover, Helena and Tiago chose to face the oldest pain of all, the doubt about who they truly were. The next morning, the village woke up restless. Whispers spread quickly. Helena had left, Tiago had run away, and the marriage had ended in tragedy. Rumors grew like weeds, fueled by mouths that never knew silence. Meanwhile, far from the judging, eyes Helena and Tiago crossed the town limits, following the only lead that could bring them definitive answers. An old physician known only as Dr. Olavo, who once worked in military hospitals and now lived secluded in a cottage hidden among forgotten hills. They were met with suspicion. The doctor, bent by time, took a while to recall the names they mentioned. But when he heard Lavra and Marline, his eyes narrowed, as if dusty doors swung open inside his mind. "You, too, are the children of that unresolved story?" he muttered. Helena and Tiago nodded. Olavo asked for silence, walked to an old iron cabinet, and pulled out a yellowed folder. From it, he removed 2 ancient medical files and a letter that had never been sent. "Lavra asked me to keep this, in case someone came looking one day." Helena's palms were sweaty as she opened the envelope. Inside, a smaller one, blood test results and a handwritten note. The note read, "Tiago and Helena have different fathers, but they share the same burden, bearing the cost of choices made by those who came before them." Relief came like a warm wind, blowing their fears far away. They weren't siblings. They had never been. The bond between them was something else entirely. Inherited pain, their mother's silences, the injustice of stories left unfinished. Helena collapsed in Tiago's arms in tears, and he held her like someone clinging to the future. "Now, finally, we can love without guilt." And in that moment, freedom arrived, silent, serene, and well-deserved. When they returned to the village, everything looked the same, but something had shifted. They no longer walked with fear or hesitation. They arrived hand in hand, heads high, their steps needing no permission. The first to notice them was Donna Estelita, who stopped sweeping her doorstep for a moment, expecting scandal. But all she saw was a whole couple, not in appearance, but in everything they had endured and overcome. Little by little, the whispers gave way to silence. The judging stares faded in the face of their quiet strength. The following Sunday, at the village market, Helena opened a small stall. Instead of hiding, she now sold homemade sweets and wooden carvings crafted by Tiago, which quickly became a hit among visitors from nearby towns. People who once turned their backs now stopped to chat, even if their shame hid behind polite smiles. Donna Marlin silently began to visit her daughter's stand, sometimes just to watch from afar. Norberto, simpler in his redemption, brought sacks of flour each month, as if silently saying, "I'm here." And on one of those sunny afternoons, when everything seemed to finally fall into place, Tiago took Helena to the fig tree where they had shared their first kiss. There, with the breeze rustling the leaves and hearts finally at peace, he knelt before her and said, "Now that I know who I am, I can ask you to be mine completely." Helena smiled, eyes brimming with tears, and replied, "You were already mine before all of this. Now, it's just our turn to write a new story." And so, beneath the very tree that marked their beginning, the true restart began, this time with no ghosts, no fear, no secrets. But fate never sleeps. And it still held one last surprise. The following months brought an almost miraculous calm for Helena and Tiago. Their market stall thrived, orders grew, and even the sharpest tongues in the village began to surrender to the obvious. Their love had survived what few could endure. But what no one knew, not even Tiago, was that Helena was keeping a secret, one that grew silently, like a seed in her womb. She had discovered the pregnancy 3 weeks earlier, but kept delaying the reveal, waiting for the right moment. And that moment seemed to never come, as if something inside her whispered that fate still had one last card to play. That morning, while preparing sweets for the market, Helena was struck by a sudden dizziness, making the spoon fall from her hand. Tiago rushed to her side, holding her in his arms. "I'm fine, just tired," she lied, but he knew her too well to believe that. That night, lying beside him, Helena finally spoke. "Tiago, there's something inside me. Our child." The silence that followed was heavy, soon melting into a long embrace and quiet sobs. "You've given me the greatest gift anyone could," he whispered. "Now it's the three of us against the world." But the world, as always, isn't so quick to forgive. The following week, after returning from the market, they found the front door ajar. The house was torn apart, furniture shattered, wood carvings destroyed. The old trunk had vanished. Someone had broken in and left a message scrawled in charcoal on the wall. "You can hide your name, but not your blood." The past, even when disowned, had come knocking once again. Tiago remained silent. Helena felt the baby inside her stir in fear. It was a sign. This wasn't over yet. They went to the town's police station, but the response was cold. The local sergeant, more interested in the radio soap opera than their case, muttered, "Dig up old dirt and you'll find worms." They left frustrated. But on the way back, an anonymous note appeared in the basket of their cart. "The will has been contested. Powerful people want to prove you lied." The threat was clear, and it came from where they least expected, Tiago's own relatives, who had never accepted his renunciation. Now they were trying to prove he had forged everything to hide the fortune. Helena and Tiago returned home with the weight of the past once again on their shoulders. But something was different now. They were no longer alone. In her womb, a new beginning beat softly. And for that new life, they decided to face whatever came. If it's war they want, then war they'll get. But not with weapons, Tiago. With truth, with proof, with courage. He nodded, gripping her hand tightly. And so, for the first time, they returned to Silvera's office, the family lawyer. But not to renounce, this time to reclaim. We're telling everything about the escape, the will, the trunk, and we'll prove we never hid anything. Silvera, visibly impressed, listened in silence. When they finished, he stood slowly and opened the safe. From it, he pulled an envelope he had never revealed before. Lavra left this in case everything fell apart. This is the final key, the real one. Helena and Tiago exchanged a glance. Inside the envelope was a name, one no one had ever dared speak aloud. And now it changed everything once more. Because it wasn't just about fortune, it was about identity. And this final revelation could end it all, or restart what even Lavra hadn't dared to live. Inside the envelope, folded with extreme care, was a handwritten document, notarized and stamped with a date nearly 20 years old. It was Tiago's birth certificate. But what drew their attention wasn't the paper itself. It was the name. Listed as the father, Norberto Souza de Andrade. Helena's world collapsed. The ground vanished beneath her feet. Her heart froze. Senor Norberto, the man she called father, was also Tiago's father. The love of her life was her blood brother. And now there was no more doubt. The silence that followed was the cruelest yet. Tiago took the paper, read it once, twice, and then stepped back, pale, as if each movement dragged him further from reality. "No, this can't be," he whispered. But it was. Silvera confirmed. Lavra demanded it be kept secret. Senor Norberto swore never to acknowledge the child publicly, all because of pride, because he feared his wife. And now, it's all come out. Helena dropped to her knees, tears caught in her throat. This was more pain than she had ever known. It felt like the end of everything they believed to be true. Back in the village, they returned in silence. Not a word between them, just the sound of hooves on dirt and the wind cutting through their faces. Once home, Tiago locked himself in the bedroom. Helena curled up on the sofa, clutching her belly. The child inside her now carried a burden she had never imagined passing on to another human being. What now? How could they go on? How could they love what had suddenly become forbidden, even by the laws of blood? In the middle of the night, Tiago walked to the fig tree, the place where it had all begun, and stayed there until dawn, like a statue facing a past that refused to die. But it was there, under the tree that had once united them, that Tiago made his decision. He returned home and without hesitation said, "We're doing a DNA test. We can't live off assumptions." Lavra spoke her truth, but she was afraid too. Maybe this paper is just another way she tried to push us apart. Helena, eyes sunken and body drained, only nodded. Hope was faint, but it still flickered. It was the final spark. And so, in the days that followed, the test was done, sent off, and the waiting began. A torment worse than any other. Every minute felt like a year. Every silence, a trial. Then, 2 weeks later, the envelope arrived. Helena couldn't bring herself to open it. She asked Tiago to do it. He opened it with trembling hands, as if diffusing a bomb. He read, eyes scanning rapidly, then froze. The silence lasted over a minute. "Well?" she asked, barely breathing. He looked into her eyes, knelt in front of her, placed his hand over her belly, and said, "We're not siblings. We never were, and this child is only ours." Helena sobbed as if being born again. Tiago pulled her into his arms, and finally they allowed themselves to breathe. Months later, a baby girl was born, Clara, as bright as the day that brought them together. And when she opened her eyes for the first time, all the ghosts went quiet. The entire village, once overflowing with judgment, now looked on in reverence at the family that had defied history itself. Helena and Tiago were never perfect, but they built something no one could destroy. A love born of truth, tested through pain, and triumphant in the end. Because some stories, no matter how painful, exist to teach us one thing, that only love has the final word. And in that forgotten corner of the world, they finally wrote theirs. And if you make it this far, it's because you felt just like we did every beat of this story deep in your heart. Because this wasn't just about Helena and Tiago. It was about courage, about standing up to appearances, facing judgment, uncovering family secrets, and above all, loving even when the whole world says it's wrong. They reminded us that no matter how dark the road may seem, there's always a chance to begin again. And that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only soil where love can truly grow. Now I want to ask you, have you ever lived a love that felt impossible? Have you ever had to choose between what the world expected from you and what your heart was screaming for? Share your story down in the comments. You never know who you might inspire. And of course, if this story moved you, gave you chills, or even made you tear up, make sure to subscribe right now. Every video here is made with soul, with truth, and with that rare kind of emotion that's so hard to find these days. Hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next, because the next stories will touch you even deeper.